Winter. It's nature's time to pause. A time of quiet change, of restoration and revival. At first glance, nature appears to be mostly asleep. But beneath its icy exterior, the natural kingdom is quite alive and adapting to these seasonal changes.
Our wildlife uses many different methods to adapt to the seasons. But will they be able to adapt when the Earth experiences dramatic climate change? And how much do humans play a part in these changes? Today, we'll find out on this episode of Off the Trail.
Animals are experts at adapting to the wintertime. But can they adapt to drastic climate change? And what does that mean for Long Island? As the climate changes, we see extremes in weather. Due to our mild winters, we see southern pine beetles thriving here. As a result, large expanses of pines are being decimated on Long Island. Every winter, we also have snowy owls descend onto our beaches. They fly down because of the harsh winter conditions and deep snows in the Arctic. But here, it's much more mild and food can be readily caught. But if our warming trends continue, our snowy owls may stop flying down here. Our local deer population is also experiencing changes. Staying warm is easy with their hollow hair, acting like styrofoam insulation around them. But finding enough food to eat is the real challenge, especially under deep snow. But as our winters become increasingly milder and the snow cover thins, more and more deer are easily surviving the winters, meaning higher reproduction rates, which in turn leads to more conflicts with humans, like car collisions or eating our shrubbery and gardens. Dr. Black, an associate professor at Stony Brook University, has been studying climate change for 28 years. He is a paleoclimatologist and studies how the oceans, atmosphere, and land interacted in the past to produce climate change, to better understand how the climate system works and what causes it to change.
My area of research is trying to look at how climate varies through time. And part of that is to try to get a feel for how climate changes, how much it changes, how fast it changes, where it changes, prior to a time when humans might have possibly influenced it. And by doing that, it then lets us look at what we observe around us today, and we can go, well, is that part of the natural range of climate change, or is it outside the range? A place like Long Island, we deal with issues like sea level rise, whereas sea level is increasing, and it's gone up by about 7.5, 8 inches or so over the last 100 years. That creates pressure of the salt water from the oceans and Long Island Sound into that fresh water supply. And you don't need a lot of salt in your drinking water. As a matter of fact, you're just a fraction of a percent before it becomes unusable, not just for drinking, but agriculture, industrial uses, or anything else.
The Coast Guard stations used to be resupplied all with a series of ice boats that would go from station to station, and they used to race in the Great South Bay on their ice boats. He was telling me how even the Hudson River would freeze, and they would race boats up and down the Hudson River, and that doesn't happen anymore.
No.
These ice boats are in sheds and garages and not being used anymore, and that really got me thinking. I was like, that's some long-term proof right there that happens within a few lifetimes.
The kind of knee-jerk response when you hear something like that is, well, it's gotten warmer, and that's why we're not getting the ice anymore. But particularly for the Great South Bay area, there's another possibility, which is we as humans have used freshwater resources on the island that might have otherwise trickled into Great South Bay in the past.
Could be saltier.
Here, exactly, and if it's saltier, it's tougher to freeze. You make a good point, though. It's a case of many people's thoughts about climate change are heavily influenced by what they personally experience. If they're in an area that has experienced unusually warm temperatures over the last season or the last year or so, then you'll discover that they tend to be more willing to acknowledge that climate change is occurring and it's something to be concerned about. Conversely, if there have been a set of unusually cold winters or unusually cool summers, people tend to stop thinking about it nearly as much. We need to look at the big picture, and even though most people's thoughts on climate change are influenced by what's going on locally, the issue is much larger.
So what are some things that we could do then?
Unquestionably, reducing greenhouse gas emissions is a start. Doing things that make our planet absorb less energy from the sun in the first place, so there is less of that energy being re-emitted by the Earth, which is what gets trapped.
One of the things that this park here did was they don't have an asphalt parking lot. They have cobblestone sort of, so rainwater goes through. It doesn't really collect any heat in the summer.
I think at this point we're actually looking at really how are we going to adapt to the changes that have occurred. I try to remain optimistic that we haven't changed things to the point where we're really going to have to do much about them.
So even if we stopped all emissions right now,
warming will continue for at least the next couple of centuries. It's already there. It's the equivalent if you have a big truck on a steep hill and you take your foot off the brake, it starts moving, and putting your foot back on the brake doesn't stop it immediately. It continues to roll downhill a little bit before it finally comes to a stop. And we have started the slow responding parts of the climate system reacting to the forcing we've applied. And it's going to take a while for them to actually stop. Climate change impacts Long Island through those two, also potentially through the spread of infectious diseases. West Nile virus was unheard of in the United States, much less on Long Island 20 years ago. And it's not that we didn't have air transportation back then moving mosquitoes around, it was just the climate wasn't suitable to sustain the type of mosquito that serves as the host for that disease, and now we do. So now we see that here.
All right, well, certainly there's some doom and gloom kind of figures out there and predictions and stuff like that. Is it really so hopeless and futile?
You have to remain optimistic. It's a case of if we just say, well, it's already happening, there's nothing we can do about it, then that's just going to make the situation substantially worse. It's kind of like if you know you're about to hit the car in front of you, you don't go, well, just screw it, I'm going to hit the accelerator and let's just go full tilt at it. You at the very least try to brake to minimize the potential impact.
We're here in the Nature Studio, and we have the privilege of having Judy Bosworth here. She's the town supervisor here, and thank you once again for joining us. I really appreciate you showing up today on this rainy day.
It is a rainy day, but it's sunny inside of the Yes We Can studio in North Hempstead, and we're so happy to be able to be here and do another Range of Powers episode for our North Hempstead TV.
Yeah, thanks. This episode, we're really talking about how climate change is affecting wildlife communities and even our feathered friends. And what we've been noticing is birds have been migrating a little bit earlier, trees have been leafing a little bit sooner. One of the things that I think everyone can do if they want to help out at home is to put out some bird seed in the wintertime and help feed our feathered friends, because the ones that are here all winter, they need to fuel up and be able to, most of our birds that stay here all winter, they actually migrate further north in the springtime, and they get a jump on the birds that have flown all the way down to the Amazon and such that are just now starting to arrive. So this time of year we have both birds that are just arriving and those that are still kind of fattening up to head further north.
We have some great varieties of birds here in North Hempstead. You know, throughout the winter we have blue jays and cardinals and sparrows and woodpeckers. There's nothing more beautiful on a winter snowy day than to see a red cardinal just kind of flitting across, you know, the backyard or wherever you see them, and it almost looks like a Christmas card. But we do know that some of the birds need some help during the winter. And so that's part of what we're here today, is to talk about a suet seed cake special that we can make here now, and that it's so easy to make at home. But I think it's important to note, while it's good to feed the birds during the winter, we really don't encourage feeding them during the summer. And if you're going to feed them during the summer, then you need to make sure you feed them all year round.
All year round,
So,
right. So what have we got here? Looks like a great suet recipe.
it starts with a cup of crunchy peanut butter, which is actually in here already because it's been melted. 1 cup of lard. Now, many of you below 30 or below 40 probably have never seen lard. I have to tell you, I've actually never seen lard either. But here it is, and so that's one of the ingredients. And so that was melted beforehand, and we have that in here. And then we're gonna add all the other ingredients. So
Okay.
we'll do it together.
Yeah, here
We have
go.
a third of a cup of sugar. I feel very Rachel Ray. But here we have a third of a cup of sugar.
I'll stir it in.
Okay. And we have 2 cups of quick cooking oats. So here's 1 cup.
This is looking good.
Range of Powers is a very good stirrer. The 2nd cup.
All right, good. It's coming right along
Here
here.
we go.
So how about some cornmeal now?
That's it. 2 cups of cornmeal.
Wow. I might have to reach these others.
Okay. And then I'll do the stirring.
So we have an additional cup of flour. That's gonna thicken it right up. And lastly, a cup of birdseed.
And I would say that Lovey,
Yeah, Lovey.
our resident dove, came and absolutely just went immediately for the birdseed. Is he gonna? Yeah, there he goes.
So she loves it. She approves of this birdseed, that's for sure. All right, so let's put this in. That's great, and it's already really thickening up here. And this is the fun part now if you're working with your kids at home, because now you're really gonna want to get your hands in there and really kind of work this stuff with your hands, and that's a lot of fun. So you're just gonna wanna pack it into here. And of course, I recommend getting your hands dirty with this. You're gonna want several of these containers around. And then what do you do with it?
Well, the great thing is you can just put it out, or you can put it in your freezer so that if you find that you feel that your birds are particularly hungry, you can just take it out. And here's the thing, you can unmold it. We're gonna do that. Here we go.
Uh-huh.
And there you go. Our suet seed treat for our birds.
That's beautiful. And I know there's different Tupperware shapes. Some of them are more rectangular, and they might fit right into a regular suet basket that you can buy at any bird supply store. So I know Lovey appreciates that, and our other bird friends will too out back. So
here, from a bird's eye point of view, we know that if you do that, you can be very, very popular with our bird friends throughout North Hempstead.
Nice. Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate
Thank
it.
you, Ranger Pat. It was a pleasure again.
Yeah, absolutely.
And thank you, Lovey.
So if you want to watch full episodes of Off the Trail, you can visit mynhtv.com or pay me a visit at yc2n.com. And until next time, I'll see you off the trail.